Hello everyone, welcome back to a Med Boys Monday. Today we've compiled all of our med school videos into one long video so you can get all the information you're looking for Ontario medical schools in one video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you liked the video and let us know what you'd like in the future. So you want to get into U of T Med, the hardest medical school that's even harder than Harvard Med. You've come to the right place. I was fortunate enough to get into U of T this past cycle, and you've come to the right place to get all the information you need in order to get into the medical school of your dreams.
To give you a sense of the U of T MD program's admissions process, let's go over some of the admission stats for the 2021 to 2022 cycle. So that was the previous cycle. 4,302 people applied to the program, out of which 638 were interviewed and 260 went on to be accepted. That's a 6% acceptance rate. What? And before you freak out, don't worry, because we have everything you'll need to know about the process covered in this video. Be sure to watch till the end though, because we do have some important details that U of T places a lot of emphasis on towards the end of the video, so you don't want to miss out on that.
Now, before we get on with the video, I just want to give a quick disclaimer that we're in no way associated with the University of Toronto admissions process, and we're only giving you information from the research that we did and from our own prior experiences. So without further ado, let's get into the first step, which is to get an interview.
The University of Toronto is one of the most recognized universities in Canada, and that's why its med school is so popular. Its program is 4 years long, like most other med schools, and it has two campuses, one in downtown Toronto and one in Mississauga. Some of the hospitals that U of T is tied to include Mount Sinai, UHN, and Sick Kids. You might have heard of these names before, and that's because they're recognized across the world for the work that they do. A fun fact about U of T is that insulin was actually discovered here. Now that you know a little bit about U of T, let's get into the admissions process.
The pre-interview score consists of a few different things. Things like GPA, like MCAT, like autobiographical sketch or your ABS, and it also includes things like your essays and your references. Fortunately, Casper isn't required for U of T, so that's really good news. And in this video, we're going to start with the pre-interview stuff and then move on to post-interview so that you can get all the information you need.
Your GPA is one of the most important parts about your U of T admissions process. This is because your GPA is assessed competitively, which means that the higher your GPA, the better your chances of getting in. The minimum GPA to apply to U of T's med school is 3.6 if you're an undergraduate student, or 3.3 if you're a graduate student. But as you can see, the average GPA of someone who gets into U of T is insanely high at around 3.94. That's why we say that U of T might be harder to get into than Harvard's medical school. One thing to keep in mind about the number 3.94 is that it's not the cumulative or overall GPA of the applicants, it's actually a weighted GPA. The way U of T calculates this weighted GPA is that, let's say you're applying in your 4th year or later, they drop your 2 worst courses per year of study. So for example, let's say you did poorly in chemistry and biology, those were your 2 worst marks of your 1st year of study. That means that those 2 courses won't be counted as part of the GPA calculation process for your weighted GPA. However, in all future application cycles, U of T has made it clear that they will no longer be using this weighted GPA system, and instead they'll be going ahead with calculating your overall or cumulative GPA and using that for the admissions process instead.
Now, the MCAT is often viewed as a central point of any medical school application, but for U of T, it's merely a cutoff. So you need 125 in 3 sections and 124 in any of the other sections.
This is the hard part. U of T is infamous for its essays, and they are very important for the admissions process. So in total, there are 3 essays. 2 of them are based on prompts that U of T gives you, and you can only write 250 words for each of them. The last one can be 500 words long, and it's based on one of your ABS items that you choose. Here are the prompts for this year.
So you might be wondering, Rushel, how exactly are these essays marked? Well, fortunately, U of T tells us exactly how. On their website, they list these 4 clusters: professional, communicator / collaborator / manager, advocate, and scholar. They base your essay and they evaluate it based on these 4 clusters. So keep these in mind when you are writing your essays for U of T.
The ABS statement is vital to almost every medical school application, and especially for U of T. You can add up to 32 entries where you can add your activities, and the way they're assessed by every medical school is by relating them to CanMed's rules. But U of T focuses more on clusters, so whenever you're writing your descriptions, make sure they're related more to the clusters and the CanMed's rules.
U of T also has some academic requirements. If you're an undergraduate student, then you can only apply after you've finished 2 years of undergrad or you've been enrolled in a program that's up to 15 full course equivalents. 1 full course equivalent is equal to 2 half courses. And there are also some prerequisites that you have to keep in mind. So for example, you need to have 2 full course equivalents in a life sciences major or life sciences course, and then you have to have 1 full course equivalent in a social science, humanities, or language.
If you're a graduate student, you have to complete your master's or PhD before you apply to U of T in Canada. And if you're an international student, you have to complete a non-medical bachelor's degree that is equivalent to a 4-year degree here in Canada. For both of these, the prerequisite courses that we talked about for undergraduate students are the same.
For every medical school in Ontario, you need 3 references. So in order to do that, you just need to fill their contact information out on the OMSAS portal and then submit it. Once it's submitted, the forms are sent to your 3 references and they're supposed to fill it out. And once it's filled out, it goes to all the medical schools that you're applying to. But make sure you choose your 3 references wisely because U of T pays special attention to these 3 references.
The last thing we'd like to mention is the academics explanations essay. This is completely optional and you totally don't have to do it. However, if you believe that your marks or your GPA don't really represent your actual abilities, then you can write this essay to explain why your marks are like this. So for example, let's just say you had a really bad year where you had some sort of horrible accident, and that's why your marks were so low. You could write about this in the academic explanations essay, and there's a possibility that they may give you an exception.
All of these factors are totaled together and you're given a file review score, but you won't actually know what your score is. All you will know is that if your score is high enough, you will be given an interview invite.
Happy, 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 happy. Whoa, okay, calm down, breathe. I'm trying.
Now you might be wondering when U of T invites actually come out. Now U of T is unique in the sense that it sends out 3 waves of interviews. So the first wave is usually in late January, and then the second wave is early February, and then the last wave is usually late February. So interviews take place 2 weeks after the invite's sent out, so technically there's 3 different interviews.
The format U of T uses isn't like any other med school. As you can probably already tell, U of T likes to be different.
Are you serious?
And in this case, they use a modified personal interview, or the MPI. In this interview, you talk to 1 interviewer for 12 minutes, and then there's a break in between different interviews, and that break lasts for 3 minutes.
During the pandemic, U of T changed their format to something called the VMPI. The V stands for virtual, and it's basically an online version of the modified personal interview. Depending on the COVID restrictions this cycle, they may go ahead with this same format that they've been using for a couple admission cycles now. The way this format works is that you're given 3 minutes to read the question or prompt and think about it, and then 5 minutes to actually answer the question. You won't be talking to anyone directly, but instead you'll be talking to a screen and your answer will be recorded. It'll later be sent off to be evaluated by independent interviewers.
Now, here's a question. How are your interviews evaluated? And you probably guessed it right, it's through clusters. The same clusters you use to write your essays and the same clusters you use to write your ABS statement. So whenever you're practicing for your interview, make sure you integrate those clusters into your answers.
After you're done your interviews, it's just a waiting game. Your results come out on the 2nd Tuesday of May every year. I don't know why they do this, but it's some sort of ritual they have maybe. So in terms of breakdown, your pre-interview score makes up 33% of the decision whether you get into medical school or not. And then your post-interview or your interview score is what consists of 67% of that decision. Therefore, you can see that the interview is indeed very important.
To end off the video, here are some U of T med students who are going to talk about their experience and some pieces of advice that you can use to get in.
Hi everyone, my name is Vikas and I'm a second-year anesthesiology resident at the University of Toronto. I have completed my medical school training here at U of T and I've been very fortunate to be a part of the admissions team over the past couple of years. In this role, I realized that this institution appreciates applicants that are all-rounded. And as cliche as that sounds, what I mean by this is that apart from the high MCAT and high GPA scores, what U of T really values is the applicant's ability to reflect on the longevity of their extracurricular activities, on their leadership potential, on their scholastic activity, including research publications and presentations, and lastly, to really have strong references that can vouch for their academic and overall personality as they embark on this new journey. Overall, I've really enjoyed my experience here at U of T, and I would like to take this chance to wish all prospective applicants good luck and all the best.
So, you want to get into Queen's Medicine, the so-called black box of Ontario med schools? We actually got interviews from Queen's this cycle, and that's why today we'll be sharing with you all of the information we gathered over the course of the admissions process that you absolutely will not be able to find anywhere else.
Before we get started, you're probably wondering how hard it is to actually get into the Queen's Medical School. So statistically last year, 5,540 people applied and 512 received an interview. And out of the 512, 108 got an acceptance. This makes the acceptance rate 2%, making it one of the hardest medical schools to get into statistically.
Also, we'd like to mention that we're in no way associated with the Queen's admission process, and all this information we're providing to you is only based on our own experiences and what we've researched online.
Now, if you don't know anything about Queen's Med, here's a quick overview of what you're getting yourself into. The program is 4 years long, like most other med schools, and it only has one campus that's located with the main university in Kingston. One fact about Kingston is that if you're a foodie, Kingston has one of the highest restaurant densities in Canada. So if you're looking for restaurants, you won't be left hungry. Another cool fact about Queen's is that they have their very own cadaver lab, so you can work with real human bodies. But don't try to recreate Friday the 13th with them.
In addition, Queen's class size is about 100, so past students have actually talked about how they were able to form tight-knit relations with their classmates and faculty and staff much easier than bigger schools like U of T and McMaster.
Let's now move on to the pre-interview process. Almost everything will be looked at throughout this process. Your GPA, CASPER, and MCAT will all have cutoffs, and they're not published by Queen's, hence the name black box that's given to them by many med students. You're going to have to meet each of these individual cutoffs, and only then will your file move on to file review. Also, these cutoffs change every single year because they depend on other students and their own stats.
Let's talk about your GPA first. Queen's used to look at your 2 most recent years of study and calculate your GPA based on just those 2 years. However, they've actually announced that with all future application cycles, including the upcoming one, Queen's will be switching to looking at your overall or cumulative GPA like some other med schools. While Queen's hasn't made it clear what their GPA cutoff is, it's not even listed on their website anywhere, we can estimate what a competitive GPA looks like.
We know that the average accepted GPA for Queen's last year was a 3.85, so you'll probably need somewhere around that number to get accepted and get past the stages.
As far as the MCAT scores go, you're going to need to meet 2 requirements. First of all, you'll need to have a high enough overall MCAT score, and you're also going to have high enough scores for each of the sections. For the overall MCAT, the average score was 513 this past cycle, so anywhere 1 or 2 points away from there should be fine. For the section cutoffs, 127 in CARS and 126 in the other sections should be fine. This is based on what other applicants have told us and also anecdotes from forums, while also looking at stats from other schools like Western.
For Casper, that's probably the hardest stat to give a number for, but the best rule of thumb to follow is that the higher your score, the better your chances are of getting in and even getting past the interview stage.
Queen's will look at your ABS and references during that file review stage we were just talking about. During this time, your ABS is very important because Queen's puts a lot of importance onto your extracurriculars. The ABS statement has up to 32 entries, so make sure you fill them out, and they're split into a few sections. Some of those sections are something like research, extracurriculars, awards and accomplishments, and volunteering.
Try to include something in every section of your ABS. Show that you're a well-rounded applicant. And in addition, you obviously need a verifier for each activity. Lastly, Queen's has stated that they do not look at activities that you did in high school, so even if you included them, they won't be looking at it. If you started the activity in high school and continued it into university, they will probably look at the times that include the university more than the high school.
Then, the admissions team scores you based on your MCAT, Casper, cumulative GPA, references, and ABS. This total score is put into a list with the highest scores at the top of the list and the lowest scores at the bottom. Then, Queen's will select approximately 500 applicants who have the top 500 scores for an interview, but that's only step one.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Queen's is the only medical school in Canada that has a two-part interview process. First, they're going to send you an MMI invite, and then if you do well on that, then you'll get a second invitation probably a month later that tells you that you're invited to their panel interview.
MMI stands for multiple mini interviews, and in this format of interviews, you're given a prompt and you're supposed to read and think about it critically and then answer the prompt. And just like this, you're supposed to go through multiple different prompts, and each prompt is rated by a new interviewer. And Queen's just mentioned that they are going to be holding their interviews online, so be prepared to talk to a screen just like we are right now. And I'll attach a link in the description about some general MMI tips that might help you.
As we said, if you do well on your MMI, you're going to be invited for a panel interview. For this, it'll be virtual, just like your MMI, but the difference here is that you'll actually be interviewed by real people in real time. Now, Queen's doesn't actually provide more information about this publicly, so if you do want more details, you gotta get there.
If you're wondering how Queen's marks the interviews and comes to a decision, it's one of the greatest mysteries in the world because it's so confidential. However, there are some things you can do, such as follow the CanMeds rules and also just practice every single type of question so you know what's coming and don't get hit by surprise.
Now, all that's left is months and months of waiting and stress and anxiety. Try not to go crazy. Remember that all of the results for all medical schools in Ontario comes on the second Tuesday of May. University of Ottawa Faculty of Medicine. No MCAT, and the only medical school that teaches in French and English. We got an interview from uOttawa Medical School this past cycle, and we want to give you all the tips so you can achieve the same results. We also have a special guest towards the end of the video, so make sure you stay until the end. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get on with the video.
So let's start off with the admission stats like we do in our other videos. There were 4,823 applicants who applied in this past cycle, out of whom 580 were interviewed and 168 were admitted. This brings the acceptance rate to about 3.5%. However, you also have to keep in mind that every year there are about 118 people in the English stream and another 48 in the French stream. So the numbers can vary depending on how many applicants applied to each stream.
Also, we'd like to mention that we are in no way associated with the admissions committee at uOttawa, and we're only providing this information based on our own research and our personal experiences.
But why is uOttawa medicine so desirable? Well, they consistently rank among the top 10 medical schools in Canada, and they also receive a lot of funding from the government for all the research that they do at their university. Their 4-year program is split into 2 years of pre-clerkship and 2 years of post-clerkship, so pretty traditional for medical school.
uOttawa Med is also the first and only bilingual medical school in Canada, and this gives you a lot of access to varied populations when you're in your clerkship, since there's going to be both languages. And they also have made sure that both of these programs are equally identical and accredited. uOttawa also is in the capital city of Canada, so you get access to a lot of other resources because there's Parliament there, there's a lot of bigger companies there that you can partner with. And uOttawa also has a lot of international partnerships that you can benefit from if you go to their university.
Now, let's go over the application process. If you want to apply to uOttawa, you can only do so after your third year of study, and also you need a bunch of prerequisites if you want to be considered. First, we have 2 semesters of social science or humanities course, 2 semesters of bio, then 1 semester of general chemistry, 1 semester of organic chemistry, 1 semester of biochemistry, and 1 of statistics. So there are a few prereqs you definitely need to consider. Also, for all of these prereqs, you will need to maintain a 3.0 GPA on a 4.0 scale if you want to be considered. And finally, you need to have finished all of these courses before you attend medical school.
Now, as you may have heard, uOttawa is well known for their weighted GPA calculation, or let me rephrase, was well known for their weighted GPA calculation. So what they used to do was they would give the highest weighting to your most recent marks. So for example, if you applied after your third year, they would give the highest weighting to your third year marks, and then followed by your second year, and then finally your first year. That used to be the case, but now they switched back to CGPA, unfortunately.
According to their website, uOttawa says that their minimum GPA cutoff is 3.5 on the 4.0 scale. However, they also mentioned that 3.85 is somewhere that should be considered competitive. Based on this past cycle and what we've seen on forums and on Reddit, 3.85 is often seen as a cutoff. So you have to have a mark that's substantially higher than it, or have to make up for it in other ways such as Casper or your ABS or your interview. Another note is that uOttawa actually looks at your summer courses, and I know this is confusing for a lot of other med schools, but we wanted to include it here.
uOttawa is one of the only med schools in Canada that actually doesn't require the MCAT for its application process.
Yes! 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 Yes!
So if you're planning on applying here, don't worry about writing the MCAT or getting a good score. It's definitely not required. However, the MCAT is required for most other med schools in the province and across Canada.
The last academic requirement is the Casper test. Now, a lot of us have very strong opinions about this test, but if they don't count the MCAT, then we can only assume that Casper is very important for the admissions process. So work very hard for this test and try your best to get a 4th quartile, because that will give you the best chances of getting an interview.
What's remaining now is your ABS, or autobiographical sketch. The ABS has up to 32 entries that you can fill up, and it has various sections like volunteering and extracurriculars. But uOttawa is unique because it asks you to pick 3 activities in each of those sections, totaling up to a maximum of 18 activities. So you're going to select these on OMSAS, and we don't know how much weight they actually put on the activities that you don't select. Nevertheless, just make sure you put your full effort into all 32 entries, because you never know if that's going to get you an interview or not.
You will need a total of 3 references for your application. One of them is employment/academic related, the other one is non-academic, and the last one can be of your choosing, so any category that I've mentioned here. One thing you have to keep in mind is that once you fill out the contact information of your references, a confidential assessment form will be sent to their email. That's what they have to fill out in order to be your reference. And here are some of the questions they actually include on the form. You can find these on the OMSAS website.
After you complete this lengthy admissions process, all you have to do now is wait, and wait. If you get an interview from uOttawa, you'll probably get an email towards late January, and you'll be asked to attend the interview in February or March. And uOttawa generally takes a more traditional approach by conducting an interview in a panel format where 2 or 3 people interview you, but it's more traditional rather than the new modern style that's being used by other universities called MMI, or multiple mini interviews.
Now that the interviews are completed, all you can do is wait till that 2nd Tuesday of May when you get that email regarding the status of your application. I'm sure all of you will do fantastic, and every one of you will get in. So that was the entire admissions process, and we hope you understood everything. Now, to give you a little bit of a sense of what Ottawa is like and how to get into these medical schools, we asked a YouTuber Tiago Lusvargi to come and give you guys some advice about how to get into Ottawa, what to do in medicine, and just general things that I'm sure will help you a lot. Take it away, Tiago.
Hey, my name is Tiago Lusvargi. I am a third-year medical student studying at the University of Ottawa. I have a YouTube channel, so make sure to follow me. Instagram, follow me there, message me at any time. All right, why did I choose Ottawa? There are a couple of reasons why I chose to apply to this school particularly. The first one is because it doesn't require an MCAT, and I did very poorly on the MCAT a couple of times, so I knew that my saving grace would be either Ottawa or Nassam and Sudbury, because neither of them look there. Then I considered the city as well, and I heard that Ottawa is a beautiful city. It's a population of 1 million people, but does not feel like that. There's a lot of greenery within the city. I heard it has a very positive student atmosphere where people are very supportive of each other. It's not cutthroat, not saying that other schools are, but that's just what I heard. And so those are the main reasons why I applied to Ottawa, and then why I chose it, because Ottawa chose me. I didn't get any other acceptances to other medical schools, so when you get chosen, you just go, and that was kind of the joke in our first day of class when everybody gave their reason for choosing Ottawa. The next question is, what can you find at uOttawa Med that can't be found at other medical schools in Canada? That's a tricky question because I don't know what other schools offer and don't offer, but I'll list some of the things that come to mind that I know has been highlighted as being special to Ottawa, okay? So in clerkship, the first 2 years of medical school, we have half days. So for most of the days, we just have lectures from 8:30 to 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. Then you have the rest of the day off, and that is wonderful for being able to actually study, to enjoy life and hobbies, to start a YouTube channel and hang out with friends and family, and that's very important. I think I've chatted with some University of Toronto students, and I don't think that's their lifestyle. It's pretty much like lecture heavy most of the day. We have really good clinical teaching sessions that I enjoy, our PSD, Physician Skills Development classes. And also the other thing is that we get to do electives right out of first year. So if you want to go and experience what plastic surgery is like, orthopedic surgery, you just message the coordinator, you message the doctor, set that up, and you can shadow them for however long as you want. The next question is, if you had to pinpoint one thing that got you into medicine, what would it be? There's probably not one thing, but if we go through the list, it's not gonna be the GPA. That gets your foot in the door, but everybody has a high GPA. There's probably some aspects in my application. So I was able to get some early on like clinical shadowing experience. I have a cousin in Brazil that does orthopedic surgery, so that might have helped. I don't know how much they value the clinical experience. So having good ABS, autobiographical sketch in your OMSAS application is beneficial. Casper is, it gets your foot in the door to an interview. And then what I think really made the difference was most likely it was the interview and being able to talk through my reasoning, share stories, connect, and that is where you make the impression that you are going to be a great colleague to those doctors. And so we had a panel interview. So there's 3 people, there's a doctor, a resident, and somebody from the community. And so you really have to make a good impression. And I think I did that. I was a warm personality, made them laugh. We had a good time, and it was stressful, but overall, I think it was the interview that really won them over. And then I will say this, a little caveat, a little nuance to medical schools. I have heard that certain medical schools, or maybe all of them, do have a demographic target, right? So if they notice that there's a lot of Brazilians moving into the city and they want to prepare Brazilian doctors, right? I'm Brazilian. Then they might be more willing to take on Brazilian students that speak Portuguese to cater to that population. I'm not saying that Ottawa does that or every school does that, but I think it is something to keep in the back of the mind that you could be highly qualified. Everybody who applies is most likely going to be qualified and has what it takes to become a doctor. But at the end of the day, they might have a checklist that either you qualify or you don't, and it's not because you don't deserve it, it's just luck of the draw for a lot of people. The last question is, why did you choose medicine as a career? it morphed from the beginning. So I've wanted medicine since I was in elementary school. Again, I mentioned I have a cousin who does orthopedic surgery, so I was interested in doing orthopedic surgery. As I started to learn about the medical lifestyle and what it takes to become a surgeon, I was like, you know what? I don't want that lifestyle. I'm not really that committed to an extra 5 years of residency. And once I did a couple of surgery rotations here, I was like, yep, nope, I'm not staying on call for that kind of thing. So I've changed my desire, my passion to be more family medicine oriented. And then even within that, I have discovered that I want to do preventative medicine, so functional medicine, or also called integrative medicine, where you use diet and lifestyle to prevent or reverse chronic diseases, like reversing type 2 diabetes, or even preventing it through eating a healthy diet and exercise. So I think that matches my definition of medicine, or what I envision medicine to truly be, instead of just being all about medications. Not that there's anything wrong about that, but I sense an increased passion and a thrill for helping people in that way. And then the last bit is also, it's more financially secure. You know, a lot of people don't like to talk about money, but it's the truth. The money is a factor. It's important to consider, and you can't write that off. Don't worry. It's okay to like money. Just don't fall in love with it, and don't let it be the sole reason. But if you're gonna work hard, you're gonna study for years, you better hope that you're gonna get compensated, right? And so it's nice that you do have that stability, although it has been shaken up a little bit during the pandemic. And those are the three main reasons and why I chose medicine. I hope those answers were beneficial and helpful. If you have any other questions, drop them down in the comments. Message me on Instagram. I reply to every message, and I hope to see you guys over on my channel or on Instagram, or even in real life one day if you're around here in Ottawa. Take care.
So Naman, it's you that wants to get into McMaster's medical school, right? Or is it you that wants to get into McMaster Medical School? I want to get into McMaster's Medical School. 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 Okay. Well, you've all come to the right place. We're going to give you all the information that you need to get into the medical school of your dreams. We also made a U of T guide and a Queen's Medical School guide, so check those out. And we have 4 more videos coming up for all the other medical schools in Ontario. So stay tuned, subscribe, and let's get into the video.
First, let's go over the 2020 to 2021 admission stats, since the past year actually hasn't been made available. For this cycle, 5,868 applicants applied, and out of which 600 were interviewed and 205 went on to be accepted. That's around a 3.5% acceptance rate. And before you freak out, don't worry, because we're going to go over everything you need to know about the application process. However, I will say that you should watch till the very end, because McMaster Med School is probably one of the hardest med schools to get into based on how they select their applicants.
Before we go further into the video, I'd like to give you a disclaimer that we're not involved with the McMaster Med admissions process, and that all the information we're providing is based on our own research and our own experience. Without further ado, let's now move into the first part of the admissions process, how to get an interview.
McMaster University's medical school is also called the Grouped School of Medicine, and it's also one of the most unique MD programs because it has 3 campuses in Ontario: Niagara, Waterloo, and Hamilton. Hamilton is the biggest campus, but Niagara and Waterloo are much smaller classes, so it can be much more intimate.
McMaster is a 3-year MD program. That means you only get 4 weeks off in the entire year. You can say goodbye to your summer because you're only going to get 2 weeks for that. However, it does save a lot of money, and you get out of medical school a year earlier than your counterparts.
One thing you should absolutely know about MAC is that their entire curriculum is based on problem-based learning, or PBL. It's basically a small group of students that are given a clinical case. You work with your group to solve this clinical case, and if you don't know certain details about the case, you can consult online resources. Don't worry, the staff is still going to be there to guide you through the process and help you. Now that you know a little bit about MAC, let's dive into the academic requirements.
McMaster Med is probably one of the most transparent medical schools in terms of how they offer students an interview. What they do is they equally weigh your GPA, your MCAT CARS, and your CASPER scores and compare that to other applicants. Each of these three components will be weighed 32%, which totals to 96%. So you may be wondering where the other 4% goes. So if you're a master's student, you get a 1% bonus, and if you're a PhD student, you get a 4% bonus. So if you've done well on your MCAT and gotten a good CAR score, you've gotten a good Casper score, and you have a good GPA, you can almost certainly expect an interview.
So you may be wondering, Naman, what about ABS and references? Well, it's funny you should ask because MAC doesn't seem to care about ABS or references when it comes to their selection criteria. But these two things are very important for other medical schools, so don't take them lightly.
Let's dissect McMaster's selection criteria. The first thing is GPA. The class of 2024 had an average GPA of about 3.88, which is actually a lot lower than other med schools in Ontario, like U of T and uOttawa. The reason this is the case is because McMaster looks at your cumulative GPA, whereas U of T and uOttawa, they take different formulas when it comes to calculating your GPA. However, when we compare the CARS scores, which is another selection criteria factor for McMaster, the average CARS score of an accepted applicant for MAC is 129, and this is a lot higher than other med schools. I know this is really high, but people have gotten in with lower scores.
While McMaster hasn't reported Casper scores in the past, based on anecdotal evidence that we've seen on forums and based on other experiences, almost everyone that got a McMaster Med interview had a 4th quartile Casper score. Comment down below if you had something lower, and that'd be really interesting to find out more about. If they do release new scores this year and they include the Casper scores, we'll be sure to post that on our TikTok page, so please follow that if you want to stay updated.
That pretty much sums up how MAC looks at your application before the interview. Now, if you're fortunate enough to receive an interview invite from McMaster's Medical School, that's where the difficult part starts. The invites are sent out in January.
So, what's MAC's interview like? It's actually a common format called the Multiple Mini Interview, or MMI for short. In the MMI, you're basically given a series of stations where you're presented with questions or scenarios, and your answer will be evaluated by a single interviewer. You might not have known this, but McMaster actually made MMI along with Casper. The MMI usually takes place in late March.
With all these interviews shifting online, it's hard to tell whether they're going to keep it asynchronous or live. It kind of depends year after year, and it really depends on the medical school. Either way, you should be prepared for both and just prepare as hard as you can.
You might be wondering what kinds of questions MAC asks. And here's a question, for example. So yeah, did you get that? Okay, perfect, let's move on.
After you're done with the interview, McMaster has a post-interview formula that they use to select successful MD candidates. So 70% of your score comes from the MMI or the interview, 15% comes from your GPA, and 15% comes from your CARS. As you can tell, we cannot see much importance being put on to the ABS or the references based on the formula, but please don't take them lightly because we're sure they're factored in somewhere else.
Now, all you have to wait for is D-Day, the day when all of your acceptance emails come out, which usually falls on the 2nd Tuesday of May.
So you really thought we weren't getting a guest on the video? Not a chance. We have the man, the myth, the legend, the person who gave us all the advice when we were applying to medical school. It's Gianluca from NextGenMD's YouTube channel. If you guys don't already know who Gianluca is, he's a first-year family medicine resident at McMaster, and he also completed his MD at McMaster's Medical School. So we'll be asking him some questions for you guys. So welcome to the NextGenMD times MedBoys collab.
Hey everyone, it's nice to meet you. Quick shout out to the MedBoys for having me on your channel today. My name is Gianluca, aka Dr. Calcagno, and I'm a first-year family medicine resident here in Canada. And you guys are getting me right now at the hospital. We are on call tonight, and there's a little bit of a downtime before it picks up in a little bit too. Here till 10. Other things you guys should know about me, I have a YouTube channel, NextGenMD over there, and I am a recent graduate of the McMaster Medical School, which I think is the reason why these fine gentlemen asked me to come on today. So, I've got a series of questions over here. The first one is, why did I want to go to McMaster Medical School? And I've spoken about it a few times in the past, but McMaster really was my #1 choice when I was applying to medical school 4 years ago at this point, so it was a long time ago now. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, when I applied, I wanted to go to McMaster, but I applied everywhere, all across Ontario. It's because really when it comes to admissions, you are just trying to get in and make yourself as competitive as possible. But I really loved two different things about McMaster. Number one, that it was a 3-year medical program that went through the summers, and I really liked the concept of being able to do all of my education consecutively so that I wasn't forgetting things over the summer, and that also I got out a year early and I was able to save a little bit of money as well. The other part that I really liked about the 3-year program was that I thought the environment that they had at the different campuses was really good, and that they started us off getting into clinics and getting into an actual medical environment in the hospitals and in outpatient community settings very, very quickly, and I really like that about the McMaster program too. Now, PBL comes from problem-based learning. That's what it stands for, and basically it is the contrast to the traditional didactic system of learning. And in that system, what happens is that you go to class and you get lectured and you have to memorize different notes, and they tell you the information that you're going to need to study for the test. But in the PBL system, you are given cases at tutorials, and what you're going to be doing with these cases are exploring them with your groups. You'll break down a story, a patient presentation that they give you, and you create your own learning objectives within the story. It really helped me personally to identify real-world situations and make connections to things that I actually want to know about the patient when I met them in real life. Personally, I was not good at PBL when I first got into the program. I think that a lot of people have difficulties making the adjustment from didactic to PBL in the beginning. But when you are able to follow along with it, I thought that it was very, very helpful in terms of learning the objectives, the learning objectives that we needed to get through in medical school, and ultimately helped me pass my exams. For me personally, I thought the 3-year program was great. I think it was the perfect fit for me as a student. I am the type of person that likes to get things over and done with rather than drag them out. And when someone told me way back when I first started medical school that I was going to be able to take an entire year off my total length of time training to be a doctor, because you're already in school for so long, I was excited for it. And I knew that it was going to be a challenge. Trying to do something that's normally 4 years in only 3 years' time means that you are going to work pretty hard in short bursts of time and then over a long stretch as well. But I think that it worked out really well. I also think that when you don't take the time off in the summer, you're always in it, and it helps you to keep everything compartmentalized and fluent. It's when you enter a clinic environment after being in it for 3 years, like now that I'm in the hospital, and it just feels to me like an extension of the stuff that I've already been doing, except now I'm a doctor and there's more responsibilities with that. But I really like the 3-year program. This one's tricky, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but the thing that got me into medical school was ultimately my MCAT score. It was my CAR score. I got a 131, and my CASPER score must have been very high as well, because my GPA at the time when I was accepted was a 3.63. I also think that I had a really, really strong interview performance. I had a lot of extracurriculars and things on my application, but for the McMaster application, they didn't really help me. I also got an interview at Queen's, and then we could talk about all the extracurriculars that I had and things that I did outside of schooling. But I really think that fundamentally, and unfortunately, especially in Canada, if you want to succeed, you need those extracurriculars, but then you also need that academic background as well. And the MCAT section, the CAR section especially, is such an important factor in determining who will get an interview. Now, my favorite part about McMaster Medical School, this is the last thing I'm going to say, because then after I am going to probably eat some dinner, get a snack, and get back to work, is that I had a lot of fun at the medical school. You hear different things talking to different people, and definitely everyone is allowed to say what their experience was like in medical school. But when I hear some of my colleagues from other centers and just other people's experience with medical school, some people talk about it as a very unfortunate, difficult, personally challenging experience. And medical school is very challenging. It is a time that you're testing yourself. But I had a really great time in medical school as well. I met some amazing friends. I got to do some really amazing things, or things that I thought was amazing anyways. And I wouldn't change that time really for anything. I thought that it was a character building experience, and I don't know if I would have had the same experience anywhere else except for McMaster. In terms of specifics, you gotta just go to the campus, go to the different campuses, look these things up yourself, and everyone's going to thrive best in a different environment. I even think that personally, I would have been able to thrive in a few different environments, but I'm really glad that I chose or was accepted to get into McMaster. They accepted me, and I'm really excited now to keep working as a doctor. And my final thoughts on this is, guys, thank you for having me on here today, and great work with the videos that you do. And I'm really glad to see that there are other people starting to get all of this information out about the Canadian pre-med scene. I wish everyone the best that's applying, and boys, I'll toss it back to you.
Do you want to get into Western's medical school? Then we're going to tell you exactly how to do that step by step in this video, so watch till the end to make sure you don't miss anything.
If you've seen our other med school videos, then you know that we love to start off with the admission stats of the med school that we're talking about. So for Western, their most up-to-date stat is from the 2020 to 2021 cycle. They don't specify the number of interviews they hand out, nor do they talk about the number of applicants, but they do mention the class size, which is 171. Also, they say that 30% of the class is from Southwestern Ontario, and 31% of the class has a graduate degree. This indicates a slight bias towards people who are from Southwestern Ontario.
I would just like to mention that we're in no way associated with the Western's admissions committee, and that all the information that we're providing is based on our research and our past experience.
Western Med consistently places in the top 10 medical schools in Canada according to Maclean's, and they have 2 campuses, one in London and one in Windsor. This way you can have distinct learning environments where you could learn a lot and have an enriched experience. They also have a huge amount of funding for their students.
Moreover, Western Med gets a lot of funding for their research, which makes them at the forefront of topics in medicine. Lastly, they have world-renowned teaching hospitals associated with their program.
Schulich only allows you to apply after you've completed 3 years of undergraduate studying, and it's a lot different from other medical schools in Ontario because they let you apply earlier. The admissions committee looks at the following: GPA, MCAT, the abbreviated ABS sketch or the autobiographical sketch, and finally your references. As of now, Western will only be taking your best 2 years for their GPA calculation. So this means they won't be looking at any of your other years past those 2 best years.
If one of your best years, academically speaking, was your first year, then 3 out of 5 full course equivalents or 6 out of 10 half courses would have to be at that first year level or higher. If it was your second year, then 3 out of 5 full course equivalents must be second year or higher. But if you want to include 3rd and 4th year courses, they must be 3rd year and higher, and this is how the condition works.
Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the different pathways that Western admissions uses. The general pathway is the one that everyone can apply through with no restrictions at all. The GPA cutoff for each of the 2 years that you are using for the general pathway is 3.7.
So Western has made a special consideration for any courses that were taken in the fall 2019 to winter 2020 semester. So please keep this in mind, that if this was your best year, only the courses from the fall 2019 semester will count towards your GPA calculation and not the courses from the winter 2020 semester. Now that we've broken down everything you need to know about the GPA calculations, let's talk about the other pathways.
The access pathway is an option for applicants whose backgrounds are underrepresented in medicine and who may have been disadvantaged by medical, socio-cultural, or financial barriers. You'll need to provide a personal statement explaining why you want to apply through this pathway, as well as supporting documentation if you want to choose this pathway. The GPA cutoff as well as the course load requirements are the same for this pathway as they are in the general pathway.
The last major pathway is the Southwestern Ontario pathway. Only people from these areas are eligible to apply, and the cutoffs are pretty similar to the general population and the access pathways.
There are also 3 other pathways. There's the Indigenous pathway, the International pathway, and the Military Medical Training Program. If you want more information on them, check the link in the description.
We did mention the GPA cutoffs from the pathways, but you're probably wondering what a competitive GPA looks like, a GPA that will help you actually land a spot in the medical school. From the admission statistics, the average GPA of accepted applicants was around a 3.87, so it's safe to assume that you'll need somewhere around there in order to actually have a competitive GPA.
So I have some bad news. Although the GPA cutoff is the same for pathway and general admission, the MCAT cutoffs are not. For the pathway admission, the cutoffs for the 2021 to the 2022 cycle were a 125 for the biology, chemistry, and cars section. in contrast, if you compare that to the general pathway, you had to have a 127 in chemistry and cars and a 126 in biology. So you really have to take a good look at this, and if you want more stats, I'll show you right here to see what the average scores were at Western, but just keep this in mind.
Unfortunately, Western does not take into account your Casper score when they're sending out interview invites. So you could have a first quartile or a fourth quartile and still have an equal chance of getting into Western's medical school.
Western will first look at your GPA and your MCAT to make sure you've met their cutoffs. It's important to keep in mind though that the cutoffs are actually based on the competitiveness of the application pool, even though we didn't mention the values before. That means that the values could go up or down this year. After you've met these cutoffs, Western will then look at your abbreviated autobiographical sketch and your references.
The ABS is an integral part of any OMSAS application, and for that matter, any application at all. So Western actually looks at it a little differently because Western has these different core values, and what you want to do is make sure you're including those in your ABS statement so Western looks at you favorably.
When you're filling out your OMSAS application, you'll be prompted to highlight your top experiences that relate to Western Med's core values into what is called the abbreviated autobiographical sketch, or the abbreviated ABS. You'll also have to explain what you learned from that experience and how that experience will help you when you become a physician. The experiences you choose should be present in your ABS, but they also allow 2 experiences to not be included.
A maximum of 8 activities are allowed, 2 per core value, and they do specifically state that if you use 4 experiences, which means 1 per core value, that will not make your application competitive. So you probably want to write 8 essays relating to 8 experiences. A few cool things to note is that you are allowed to reuse the same experience for a different core value, and you can even use the same material you used in the previous cycle if you are a reapplicant.
There's also an optional About You section where you can talk about 2 life experiences, and you can find this under school submissions on the OMSAS website.
On your OMSAS application, you'll be prompted to include 3 references. One could be academic or employment related, the second one could be non-academic or personal, and the third one could be of your choosing. But please don't include any family members or friends because they want the references to be objective.
If you manage to score well on all of these factors, Western will send you an interview invite. While we don't know exactly how many interview invites they send out, other Ontario med schools send around 400 to 500 invites, so it's safe to say Western does the exact same thing. As per their website, Western indicates that the interview is 45 minutes long and you'll be interviewed by 3 people: a community member, a physician, and a senior medical student. This will be a traditional panel interview. We don't exactly know what the post-interview factors are, but it's safe to say that Western's interview is probably going to play a large part in determining your acceptance.
So all you can do now with all the interviews complete is just wait till that second Tuesday of May where they tell you what your results are both on OMSAS and your email. So don't worry, just keep going. Focus on these short-term goals rather than the long-term goal, and it's going to make the journey way easier.
And of course, this wouldn't be a MedBoys video without a special guest who can answer any of your questions about Western. Please welcome Janiel Mbatu. He's a second-year medical student at Western, and he's one of the most hardworking and inspiring person we personally know. Welcome, Janiel.
To be honest, why I chose Western is because of the way their curriculum is structured. Our exam schedule especially, or the way we get tested, is organized such that it's not too cumbersome and we get some opportunity to learn as we go along the semester through these formative exams, but then we also get to consolidate our learning at the end of it by doing a comprehensive exam that enhances our learning. And this also gives us an opportunity to be not stressed throughout the semester while have time to do other things outside of our lectures, including things like extracurriculars, sports, and even shadowing, which is integral to our learning. So I really like that about Western. If I want to think about one thing that got into med, that's a very tough question, to be honest. I truly believe it is a combination of many aspects of my application over time. However, I think the major difference between last year and this year of applying was that I rewrote my MCAT, and then I was able to get a higher CARS score, which I think is very, very important, especially in most of the Ontario schools, especially Western. So I think that was the game changer for me, but I do think that there's other factors, like Western now looks for ABS essays, and those are very important. That comes from your experiences. So all of it matters, but for me personally, that MCAT score is what changed it for me. Well, as I said, I think, you know, one of the most favorite parts for me about Western Med and is just the way our curriculum is designed. There's this foundations of curriculum that is the first thing that we start when we start medical school. It kind of gives us an overall understanding of how to act like a physician, manage like a physician, and then that builds upon more principles of medicine topics like cardiology and other systems, and then now we're developing those systems further. So it's designed in a very good way. It's very intuitive, and it's also gives us an opportunity to do a lot of other things on the side so that we're not only just worrying about the lectures, as I mentioned earlier. So I think those are the best parts about Western medicine for me. If I think about what advice to give to students who are preparing for Western Med, I think that's also a tough one, but one of the things that I've personally found Western really focuses on is your experiences and what you've kind of done on your journey to applying to medical school, because of the essays that they evaluate in their admissions application. Those are definitely somewhat highly focused on when they evaluate applicants. So I think writing those essays in a way that expresses you as a person and highlights how you can be a good medical student is very important in the process of getting in.